Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be diving into something that I know you're all really interested in learning more about. It's the connection between air pollution and asthma. I've heard from a lot of you that this is something you're concerned about, and so am I. Well, there's this fascinating new study out of the Max Planck Institute for Chemistry, and it really digs deep into just how much of an impact PM2.5 has on asthma rates worldwide.
Yeah.
I mean, they looked at 59 scientific papers, millions of participants. So this is serious, a serious deep dive, and you'll be surprised by what they discovered.
Yeah, you're right. This goes way beyond the usual, air pollution is a bad message. What's so interesting about this study is that it gives us hard data, on a global scale. It shows just how strong that link is between PM 2.5 exposure and asthma.
Yeah, and that headline number is pretty alarming. Nearly a third of all asthma cases around the world are linked to long-term exposure to PM 2.5. I mean, that's millions and millions of people.
Yeah, in 2019 alone, they attributed 63.5 million existing cases and 11.4 million new cases to PM 2.5.
Yeah.
I mean, to put that in perspective, that's like saying the entire population of a country like the UK is dealing with asthma because of just this one type of air pollution.
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful way to visualize it. It really hits home when you think about it on that scale. But before we go any further, could you remind us what exactly PM 2.5 is and why it's so harmful?
Of course. So PM 2.5 refers to particulate matter that's 2.5 micrometers or smaller in diameter. Basically, tiny particles way smaller than the width of a human hair. And the problem is because they're so small, they can actually bypass our body's natural defenses and lodge deep within our lungs, causing inflammation and damage over time.
So it's not just about, feeling a little wheezy on a bad air day. It's about the long-term consequences of these tiny particles accumulating in our lungs.
Exactly. And what this Max Planck study does so well is it looks at something called exposure response curves. This helps us understand how different levels of PM 2.5 exposure actually translate into asthma rates in various parts of the world.
Okay, break that down for me a little. What exactly is an exposure response curve?
So imagine you're looking at a graph. On one axis, you have the level of PM 2.5 in the air, and on the other axis, you have the rate of asthma cases. An exposure response curve shows the relationship between those two things. So, for example, if you compare a heavily polluted city with a rural area with much cleaner air, you'd likely see a steeper curve in the city, meaning the risk of developing asthma increases more rapidly as PM 2.5 levels rise.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. So these curves aren't the same everywhere. They're shaped by the specific pollution levels and population vulnerabilities of different regions.
Precisely. And even in a developed country like Germany with relatively good air quality. The study estimated that PM 2.5 pollution still contributed to a whopping 11% of new asthma cases in 2019. That's 28,000 people.
Wow, that's still a huge number. It makes you think, what about my own city? What might that percentage look like here? It's almost like a hidden health crisis unfolding right under our noses.
And here's something particularly concerning that the study highlights. Children are even more vulnerable to the effects of PM 2.5 than adults.
Why is that? Is it just because their lungs are smaller?
It's more than just size. Children's lungs are still developing and they breathe more rapidly than adults, meaning they take in more air and potentially more pollutants relative to their body size. Plus, their immune systems are still maturing, which might make them more susceptible to the harmful effects of PM 2.5.
Yeah, it is pretty scary to think about just how much more vulnerable kids are to this.
Hmm.
You mentioned earlier that this study offers more than just alarming statistics, though, right? It actually points towards some potential solutions. What do the researchers have to say about that?
Well, one of the things that sets this study apart is that the researchers went beyond, simply highlighting the problem. They actually called for specific actions to address it. In their own words, they said, "Our findings highlight the urgent need for policymakers to enforce stringent legislation to continuously combat air pollution."
Wow, so they're really putting the pressure on governments and policymakers to step up and do something about this. But they didn't stop there, right? They also talked about what individuals can do to protect themselves, even without waiting for, large-scale policy changes.
Absolutely. The study emphasized the importance of individual actions, highlighting simple but effective measures like wearing masks, particularly well-fitted N95 masks. It might seem like a small thing, but especially in areas with high PM 2.5 levels, wearing a mask can significantly reduce your exposure.
Yeah, it's interesting how masks have become so normalized in recent years. Maybe that's one silver lining to come out of the pandemic. We're all a lot more aware of the importance of protecting ourselves from airborne particles.
Hmm.
And speaking of individual actions, what are some other things people can do in their daily lives to kind of minimize their exposure to PM 2.5?
Well, even small changes in our habits can add up to make a difference. For example, opting for public transportation or carpooling instead of driving alone can help reduce traffic emissions, which are a major source of PM 2.5. Paying attention to air quality forecasts and limiting outdoor activities on days with high pollution levels is another simple but effective strategy.
It really is empowering to realize that we're not just helpless bystanders in this. We can actually make choices that have a positive impact on our own health and the air quality in our communities.
Exactly. And here's another interesting aspect of this study. The researchers didn't just limit their focus to asthma alone. They acknowledged that PM 2.5 likely contributes to a much broader range of health problems.
Yeah, that makes sense. If these tiny particles can get deep into our lungs and cause inflammation, it stands to reason that they could be affecting other organs and systems in our bodies as well.
Precisely. Research has shown links between PM 2.5 exposure and a whole host of health issues, including cardiovascular disease, respiratory infections, and even cognitive decline. So while this deep dive is specifically tailored to your interest in asthma, it's important to remember that the implications are much wider reaching.
So what does this all mean for us? I mean, we've learned that PM 2.5 is a major contributor to asthma globally, especially for children, and that it likely plays a role in a wide range of other health problems as well. Where do we go from here?
Well, the key takeaway is that this is not a problem we can afford to ignore. This study serves as a powerful call to action for both policymakers and individuals. We need to continue to push for stricter air quality regulations and make conscious choices in our daily lives to reduce our own exposure and contribute to a healthier environment for everyone.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, and it's clear that PM 2.5 is a complex issue with far-reaching implications. But it's also clear that we're not powerless in the face of this challenge. What's particularly exciting is that this study highlighted the potential for citizen science to play a role in addressing this issue.
That's right. There are now incredible online resources and even smartphone apps that allow individuals to monitor air quality in their own neighborhoods and contribute to a global database. Imagine that. You can actually be a part of the solution, gathering valuable data that helps scientists and policymakers better understand the full scope of the problem and develop more effective solutions.
That's a fantastic point. It's not just about, feeling overwhelmed by the problem. It's about feeling empowered to do something about it. So instead of ending on a note of despair, let's wrap up with some concrete steps our listeners can take to learn more and get involved. What would you suggest? So where should someone even start, if they want to learn more or get involved in monitoring air quality?
Well, there are some fantastic resources out there. For example, the Environmental Protection Agency has a website. It's called Air Now, and it provides real-time air quality data for locations all across the United States. It's really easy to use and can give you a good sense of the air quality in your area. There's also a really cool app called Plume Labs. Not only does it provide air quality information, but it also offers personalized recommendations for outdoor activities based on your location and the current pollution levels.
Oh, so you check the app before you go for a run or take your kids to the park. That's really practical advice.
Exactly. And, beyond just staying informed, there are also ways to actively participate in citizen science initiatives. There are organizations like Citizen Sense. They provide tools and training for people to collect their own air quality data using low-cost sensors. And this kind of crowdsourced data can be incredibly valuable, for researchers trying to understand the complex dynamics of air pollution.
Wow, that's amazing. So we can actually contribute to scientific research just by using our smartphones and being a little more aware of our surroundings.
That's the beauty of citizen science. It empowers individuals to play a role in addressing real-world problems. And in the case of air pollution, the more data we collect, the better equipped we'll be to advocate for change and create a healthier future for ourselves and generations to come.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive. We started by looking at the link between PM 2.5 and asthma, but we've uncovered a much broader story about the impact of air pollution on our health and the steps we can take to protect ourselves and our communities.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure exploring this with you. And I hope this deep dive has empowered you to learn more, take action, and breathe a little easier, knowing that you're not alone in this fight for clean air.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you feel empowered to make a difference, and we'll catch you on the next one.